So as we dive into this topic, I'm gonna summarize a little bit and just kind of lump things together. We could probably do a whole course again on this window into art if we talked about the commerce of art and the various values a work of art can have. And the thing that I want just to impress upon you is that works of art don't just simply have a one single value, they have multiple values to multiple people. So, what I want to cover today is just some of the main things that works of art can do. So, I'll show you I'll actually break this up into several slides. So, one thing that art can have is aesthetic value. That there's something that it does to us when we connect with it. I sometimes like to, with aesthetic, also lump experiential in value with this, because when we encounter a work of art, it's an aesthetic experience and it's also an experience we have that is different than anything else. I'll show you this wonderful quote of Erick Hawkins here. Yesterday was Erick Hawkins' birthday, so I posted this on Facebook, but it was, and you're probably watching this much later, but April 23rd is Erick Hawkins' birthday. So I posted this quote that he said about the value of art to our culture, and that arts do something that no other thing do for the human soul. And that's just kind of a really great statement, and a great just feeling about this aesthetic value that a work of art can have. And the other part of that aesthetic value is the experiential value, that people like this encounter we have with real works of art. There is something that happens when I come home and I see his smiling little face every day, and I can wake up and see him also there. But that there's something that when we encounter works of art and we're in spaces with art, whether that's a performance, whether that is a visual piece of art, whether that's a piece of music, it does something to us on the inside. So that is the intrinsic aesthetic value. And again, art has been around as long as humans have been human. So it is an intrinsic part of us, and it's something that we developed out of our humanness and our way of dealing with the sensual world around us. So in sometimes I say that what art does in its basic essence is it teaches us to be human, because it comes from our humanness. Yeah. Okay, another value is a cultural value that a work of art has. So it was very clear with this work of art, this little Kalima dog, that I spoke that it came from Colima, Mexico. That is a specific culture. The Mexico is a specific country with a specific culture and with a rich, beautiful history. So sometimes works of art like this really exemplify some of that cultural value and that sense of who and what that culture was and what that culture represented and stood for. Now, the other thing I always like to say is that every healthy culture, every healthy society has healthy arts, and it reflects the identity of that group. Now, if you study history, you realize that as a culture is declining, its art also declines. So when people say, is art essential? I say, well, if the culture and the society is essential to you, well, then the art has to be essential, because they're linked together. One goes hand in hand with the other one. So this has a beautiful cultural value to it. And in performances, when I take students to Korea, I always tell them, you have to see the traditional Korean dance, because to understand Korea, you can understand it through the movement, and that art form that was created also, that has a beautiful cultural value to it. And most cultures have their own dances. And even various cultures that develop, like there is a culture to hip hop. People say that hip hop is not just, a style, it's also a culture. So when various art forms develop, they develop and they represent that culture as well. Yeah. Okay. Historical or institutional value. So, works of art, we've been talking about this is a piece of history. So, we dated it and we said it was from this amount of time, and it gives us a window back to that time. And historians, archaeologists will study works of art to tell us about what was it like back then, and what was that culture like, what were the people like. And there's a kind of historical or institutional value to this work. Museums are often set up that way too, because they will separate works of art by the various cultures. You can say, well, this is all the Greek art. This is Roman art, this is medieval art, and they'll separate it by histories, like medieval art. And you'll go through periods and you'll just see how the art has changed as time goes by. So, anyways, there's just kind of wonderful historical significance to works of art, and even works of art that were done in the 90s or the 80s. They give us windows into the past. They are snapshots of that time. Now, art can also have a religious value, and it can be symbolic of a spiritual system. Now, as I said, this piece was buried in a tomb, and that Egyptian art has that same sense also. But if we look at periods of art like medieval art, there are large groups of works of art that are symbolic, and they're symbolic of a spiritual system, and they have the iconography of that spiritual system within it. I'll show you a couple examples here as I'm talking, cut away to some things also. Yeah. Now, functional value, another value. So I like to say, we sometimes talked about that. Does art serve such a deeper function for us that sometimes it doesn't have to sustain us or do something functional for us, like feed us or nourish us. It does something more for the soul. So we sometimes think about that as works of art. But I often like to acknowledge the fact that art is functional. You can see that we decorate our homes with art. It symbolizes who we are. It allows us to feel the world in a specific way. So there's a function to it, in the same way that a dance has a function also. And even cultural dances have a function, wedding dances have a function, that they can sometimes serve other purposes other than just the aesthetic purposes that we glean from them when we encounter these works of art. So there's a functionalness to works of art also. Okay. Part of function also is this idea of entertainment, which I like to list as another value. Now, particularly in things like, entertainment, which can also be experience as well. So if we go to a gallery, that's an experience. And perhaps you can say that's an entertainment. Primarily in the theater, often people will go and say, I love to go because I'm entertained. And it somehow takes me away from my ordinary world, and it feeds me in a specific way. So entertainment, I like to acknowledge, is a value that works of art can do. All right. Now, we talked a little bit about monetary value. That works of art are, they can incur money. Yeah. So our little Kalima dog here, there's a value to him. and because he's in good condition, because he's put together, because I take care of him, he is also appreciating in value as well. So some people will say that art is a great investment because I can buy a new car and it will depreciate in value, and it's worth less the longer I have it. Same thing with your iPhone, same thing with many things. But works of art can sometimes appreciate in value, so they can be more later than they're worth now. Yeah. So monetary value. And we'll touch on performance and the monetariness of performance, but I'm going to do that a little separately as well. Okay. Now, works of art can also have political value. So in performances, in visual works of art, sometimes artists will make works of art because they're interested in change. They are interested in forwarding a political agenda that is asking for the world to be different. Yeah. And we see that all the time. We see that in bold ways. We see that in subtle ways. Yeah. And those of you at the Department of Dance know that Victoria Dale just did a wonderful series of pieces called Off the Chain. And she created a new word for that, where she called it a dance-umentary. And what she wanted was to educate people, to show them the way the world is through her eyes and through the eyes that are asking for the world to be different. So to look at things and to educate people. So sometimes now you can, whether you think that's a bold political statement or whether you think this is an educational way, oftentimes I often think works of art that are looking at the world and asking the world to be different, they have a kind of political agenda to them, where that is part of they're creating a discussion, and a discussion that is asking us to learn, to look, to question, and to possibly change. Yeah. So those are wonderful examples out there, and you can find numerous other examples in the world. And even if we go back to Plato, it's one of the reasons why he thought that the artists were dangerous, is because through their art was powerful in the way it could affect people, and they could elicit changes that might really change a society. Nowadays we think that might be a really good thing in our works of art. Yeah. And then finally, I sometimes think sentimental value, that works of art can have sentiment to them. I can remember when I purchased this piece at an auction, and I can remember thinking, I don't have a Kalima dog now. Lucky I have a couple, so that's kind of great. But when I see him, I think back to many things. I also think back to the mentors of mine who appreciated this art and first spoke of this art to me, and my love for it is connected to them. So there's a kind of sentiment within me that it somehow touches my heart. It makes me remember people. It makes me remember times in my life. It makes me remember events when this happened. I can remember the first time this little guy came home here, and the first time I even woke up and just looked into the living room and said, oh, look, there's a Kalima dog. How fantastic. Isn't life amazing? So, values of art.